Hello, marketers. This is the Funnel Lab, and welcome to Funnel Lab Fridays. Funnel Lab Fridays is a weekly LinkedIn live session where we dive into the use cases and challenges faced by data-savvy marketers. I'm your host, Eric Westerkamp, CEO of CaliberMind. Joining me today is Misha Salkinder, the Director of Customer Data Strategy at CaliberMind, and Nic Zangre, the VP of Customer Success here at CaliberMind. Today, the three of us are going to be talking about deploying B2B intent and engagement data to bring light to sort of the proverbial dark funnel. Welcome, Misha. Welcome, Nic. And welcome to the show. Maybe, Nic, you could give us a sort of a 1 minute, quick overview of your background.
Yeah, thanks for the invite today. I'm very excited about the topic. So yeah, I've been in B2B marketing technology for almost 20 years. It's funny, my original boss, when we were implementing Eloqua about 20 years ago in Salesforce, he said, "This is going to be your golden ticket, hold on to it." And it's fast forward and started CaliberMind with the team here about 7 years ago. And it's been really rewarding and fulfilling to see it come to fruition over time. So excited to be here and talk about intent.
Awesome. Thanks, Nic. Misha, maybe just super fast, a little bit on your background.
Yeah, of course. Thank you again. Love being on this show. I've spent some time before moving kind of into the data world, about 10 years in kind of pure marketing. Subsequently got curious about data-driven decision-making and marketing. Luckily found my way to CaliberMind and have been spending time kind of on the intersection of marketing and data ever since. So this is a really fascinating topic for me, and I look forward to talking about it.
Great,
Marketing's gotten a lot more data-driven over the past. Seems like there's a lot of spray and pray back when I started, or we started.
Yeah, back in the day.
Involved.
Cool. So today's use case is deploying intent data to identify and act on prospects who have sort of like buying intent, but aren't currently engaged with the brand. And I'll sort of start with a really high-level question. This is kind of for either one of you. When you think about intent data, what type of information and data do you consider sort of intent data? And what do you see our customers using for those intent signals?
So I think intent data is, it can also be often confused with the definition, and it's used in a lot of different ways. So we can think of, the Bombors of the world, highly classical top funnel intent, or in market is another way of saying it. And then you have on-site intent, and even something like filling out a demo request can actually be intent. That's much more bottom funnel, obviously. But, really what we're trying to do with intent in general is identify to whom should we pitch our product, who do we have a chance of winning over as a customer, and with the goal of ultimately accelerating the buying cycle and funnel.
Yeah.
I think the word certainly can be used in various marketing capacities. Personally, when I think intent, I think third party. I typically associate it to being in relation to my products or services, but not necessarily in relation to my organization. I don't know if that's necessarily that distinction applies to all of these variations. Of course, Nic, you brought up some really interesting ones that are first party. But generally speaking, I think of the separation of first party with third party with intent, and perhaps first party with engagement or surging.
Yeah, that's great. And that's kind of matches pretty closely to how I think of intent also. I'll throw this one out there. Why do you feel, and do you feel that intent data is becoming more or less relevant today than, say, it was 5 years ago or even 10 years ago?
Yeah, I think it's the relevancy is as I'd say equal, maybe even more, because now advertising is getting more competitive. So you really want to make those dollars apply to a targeted audience, and intent is a great way to help do that. So there's this crunch on stretching those advertising dollars. And then only recently have we been able to truly operationalize all this intent data. So maybe it's been around for longer, but I think it's a really hot topic just due to those different market pressures and dynamics.
Yeah, I think our earlier comment on general data-driven decision making, right? So that applies to both engagement and intent. There's just more attention on it because we're more aware, perhaps, of its existence and how to use it, and perhaps better motions today than there were 5, 10 years ago on how to actually act on these.
Mm.
Yeah, that sounds about right. My opinion is that with the changes that are happening with web browsers primarily, cookies being sort of harder and harder to track people, a lot of the dark funnel is becoming more and more important for marketers to figure out how do I figure out who those people are, or at least understand who out there is showing some level of intent around my products, so I know at a high level who to go target. Right? There was a point in time when everything would be tracked on your website. You'd get a form, you get a lead, and everything would start there. It's moving further and further toward sort of anonymous behavior that you need to figure out how to track and go after. That's why I kind of feel like intent data plays into that, because it gives you this early signal that, hey, here's a company, here's a prospect that may be starting to warm up. Then that could trigger some of your activities and stuff down at the top of the funnel.
Right. It's really too, with the movement, say in the last 10 years around ABM, ABX, it's a really critical part to, I think, doing that well. Right.
Yeah.
You can pick a list of accounts, but it's just going to be random on their engagement levels. You only have so many hours in the day to engage these accounts. And so that strategy, I think, has put a spotlight on intent as well.
Yeah. Cool. Let me ask, Misha, I want to ask you a question. So I know you've been seeing this with a number of our customers, but what are some of the challenges that you see facing companies when they try to activate this digital and these outbound motions and get in front of high intent prospects?
Yeah, I think it's about timing and noise, right? So I'll start with noise first. There are a lot of signals that can point interest in your product or service, right? So let's say for us in CaliberMind, it could be as general as marketing analytics, and as maybe as specific as attribution, multi-touch attribution solution, or something along these lines. The former could have a really high frequency of searches. So if you are tracking, let's say, companies that are interested in that term, you're just going to get a ton. And it's really hard to sift through that. The volume on the latter, on the very specific one, could be really low. You might not see very many of these. So it becomes without thinking about how to measure and how to correlate intent signals to outcomes, it becomes really hard to act on, right? So that's one. The timing element as well, right? So it's a fast-moving world. Of course, intent could have happened last week, and you might only get to actually do something, or you might just learn that intent exists and you want to action it, this week, and it's already a week old. So I think those are two really big pain points that I've seen organizations face with intent.
Yeah, that makes sense. I know that you and we have a really strong partnership with Bombora, and you and I have been looking through and kind of analyzing what's the best way to use that intent data for our customers. And something we've seen is that you can get this very high, some of the intent signals, they may show up a lot. And so they're flagging, hey, this term, this topic is flagging all the time. But when you start to figure out, like, how often is it flagging versus how often does it show up, say, before a customer gets engaged with your brand, or right before an opportunity gets created, it can help you start to sift through that noise by saying, well, this topic looks important, but it's because it just shows up all the time for all the companies. So it's actually not a really good signal. But some of these topics down here that maybe are, and we running it on our own stuff, we even got surprised that some of the topics that floated to the top and said these topics are actually really important, because they don't happen all the time, but when they do happen, they're highly correlated to some event that you care about, MQA creation, opportunity creation, something like that. And without the ability to kind of correlate your first-party data with that intent data, there's no way to really figure out which of these topics are actually meaningful to you.
Yeah, some of the data science work you guys have been doing has been really enlightening. The correlation is super important. And I know in the past when I've worked with intent, topic selection has been a little random. but to actually see things like prove out all the topics and that they do really lead to buying signals.
Yeah.
Really interesting to apply a data science lens to which topics to select.
Yeah. Well, it leads right into a quick question for you, Nic. Tell me a little bit how you see companies sort of operationalizing, what they're actually doing with this intent data. If they're maybe not using a tool like 6sense or Demandbase or something like that, like there's some really good tools out there that leverage intent to kind of create operationalization, but there's a lot of companies that are trying to use it in other ways. What are you seeing out there?
Yeah, so I actually listened. It's funny you mentioned six. I was listening to a podcast the other day with their VP of Demand Gen, and they use intent to forecast and develop their target revenue 2 quarters out. Very interesting when you think of it. It's really the long game, especially in B2B, because you have, an 8-month buying process, usually something like that. So you want to catch the intent when it's surging. And then I almost think intent, top of funnel, almost like a content syndication lead. They're probably not ready for a demo at that point, but you need to figure out ways to mobilize the troops. So one play is take the surging accounts within a given week or month, and that becomes an ABM target list. And you use that to audience activation, the data, send advertisement to that. And then in parallel, you're purchasing these contacts and inserting them in your CRM and doing outbounding to them to warm them up, drive awareness. And the goal is to convert that intent stage, early stage, I think, to in-funnel aware accounts that are having dialogue with you. They might not be sales ready yet, but still be in the conversation. So maybe intent is surging on a competitor and they don't even know about your brand. This is a great opportunity to build awareness. And just so you're in the conversation, you're giving yourself the best shot to win. And then track that all the way down the funnel as well.
Sorry, Nic, I'm curious. Do you think it's a long game because it's considered or it's looked at for the organization as a kind of a really top of funnel activity? So it's going to naturally take the rest of the funnel to actually get to value?
I think it's just the nature of B2B buying groups and the dynamics that, there's so many stakeholders in purchasing software these days. I run our RevOps team as well, and I need to, if I'm trying to buy a new vendor, it could take 6 months. I have to make the business case. I have to get the budget together. I have to convince Eric, our CEO. I have to convince our head of RevOps, and all the stakeholders. If it's a sales tool, I have to convince all the sales folks. So there's some natural headwinds when purchasing software in B2B. And so that's why I think it's naturally a top of funnel play. That said, if an open opportunity is surging in an intent topic, that's only gravy. That's something you want to see is, winning over the organization and seeing the whole organization surge during that buying process. But yeah, I think it's B2B, if it's a short sales cycle, maybe it's less of a 2-quarter thing, 2-month thing. If it's a short, a freemium product, if I'm an engineer and I want to stand up a free database, I'm just going to do a search, what databases are out there. And then, okay, Mongo, I'm going to buy Mongo. It's a lot and that's just a one person. But then if I want to roll out Mongo to my whole engineering organization, that's a much longer process.
It's interesting. I see often intent being used as an activation signal for sales. But I guess my question is it really a sales kind of, middle to bottom of funnel signal, or is it more of a top of funnel signal? Because for me, I think of it as it being more top of funnel, as in this is telling me about people and companies out there that I may not, if they're already already engaged with me, right? How important is that intent signal? Well, there's already intent. I already know that. But is it more like now there's companies out there that maybe aren't, like to your point, Misha, they're not aware of us yet, but they're in market, they're looking at things, and I need to make sure I get to them. Where do you guys see that, and where do you see it with different companies?
Yeah, the visual that comes to my mind is a bit of a matrix. Think of a x-axis being, first party signals. and the y-axis being third-party signals. And it is well possible that an organization finds itself, on the top right quadrant, right? Positive in both places. And there, I would certainly say, very ripe for sales.
Yeah.
Likely sales potentially already interacting.
Right. Right.
We could find itself in the high intent, but not aware at all of my brand. That becomes a marketing motion. Very clearly, I would say, where it's about branding, it's about awareness of us in the context of those intent signals.
Yeah. Yeah.
It might find itself on the bottom right, where high first party intent, but to Nic's earlier point, it might be a very small individual group, a buying group that's interested in our product, but it's not adopted yet as a concept in the organization, potentially, right? There's a lot of, let's say, CaliberMind, but not enough analytics or attribution intent happening out there, right? So I think it really depends on both these axes.
So if I hear you, and after this, I'm going to jump into tool time and show a little bit of how we visualize and look at this. But it sounds like it can play in a couple of areas in the funnel. Like if there's only intent and a company is potentially not already in your funnel in some way, then at that point in time, you're trying to get awareness, you're trying to draw them in. But if you're seeing intent and certain level of engagement, hey, there's intent, and I've seen a few people hitting my website, I've seen a little bit of engagement, I've seen some response emails, that's when it's really important to maybe spike something in the middle of the funnel. And then toward the bottom of the funnel, it may help you signal, well, maybe there's some people out here, some buying groups that I need to go find, because the people I'm working with, like I'm seeing other groups in the organization maybe that are searching on this intent, and I need to go kind of pull those into the buying group of the organization.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think, and you might even be planning to show this, but blending intent scoring with all the other first party scoring,
yeah,
I think really a killer combo, because it's definitely two sides of the coin, and there's some causation and correlation going in there. If they're already bottom of funnel with you, and I invite 20 people to a demo, then that company's going to surge, right? So that's maybe where it's a little backwards, but also I've seen customers use intent to cross sell. So this could be after they're a customer and they're surging on a new topic, a new product of interest. So there's a lot of applications. I think it's super cool.
Well, that's a great segue. I am gonna jump into what we call tool time now. We're gonna spend a few minutes and sort of on the product itself. And what I'm gonna show is.
Can you blow that up, Eric? Do you mind?
Yeah, let me try to do that a little bit there. Okay.
All right, that's better.
That should be a relatively large screen. Are you seeing it that way?
You can see it, yeah.
Okay, good. So what we're showing here is, so I'm pulling in intent data right now, currently from Bombora, intent signals on a number of different topics. And we're also pulling in intent data from G2, where G2 is companies are searching on attribution and other sources. And I found this interesting. This was actually a rather large organization that we were looking at, and we looked at their buyer journey, and we noticed up here that their buyer journey started way out here back in 2022 and all the way through 2023. And then suddenly they popped down to sort of an opportunity and something going on with us here. And when I looked at it, we realized that they had actually been surging on a lot of different intent signals in the top of the funnel during all that time. And then a couple of triggers happened and they kind of popped down in our own funnel. And I thought it was really cool to go look at the full buyer journey. And what we found is that way back out here in, kind of April, May timeframe, this organization actually on a intent signal coming from G2 searched on us, right? And then they started surging on these other intent signals. So they were surging on strategy, marketing, analytics, and publishing and conversions of the funnel. Like they were surging on these. And that actually happened for a few months, at which point in time that triggered, part of our system. They got delivered a G2 ad, right? So somebody saw that. And then shortly thereafter, a little bit more surging. And then they came in and started looking at a tour on our website. And I think this is great because it shows how at the top of the funnel, there was activity out there that we may not have been aware of if we weren't pulling that intent data in, that caused us to kind of do a bit of a reach out, high level funnel, that then caused a conversion. They came in, they looked at stuff, they looked at some content on our website, they came over to Drift, right, which is a great way people come in through Drift, and they reached out to us, and that caused a series of actions to outbound sales and connections and drop them down in our funnel. But it's a great way of showing how intent is, at the top of that funnel, we saw a lot of activity over a long period of time that then eventually transitioned into an opportunity that kind of came into our bottom funnel and triggered these activities. We can also, what's really cool is I'm actually measuring here, I'm looking at both G2 intent and Bombora intent, and I'm looking at the different topics that we've selected with Bombora intent and how they're performing over time. And are they kind of coming up or down? And I've actually filtered this list. So this is only looking at prospects that are ICP for us, that are in certain motions. Like, so I've limited the scope of this down to companies that like we care about, right? And you can see that there's, depending on the topic, lots of different surgings going on here over time, right? What's also interesting about this is that, Misha, you and I said like, oh, ROI analysis popping all the time. But then we ran a regression algorithm on and said, yeah, but that's partially because it just shows up all the time everywhere anyways. So we actually would de-weight that in our system.
Mhm.
And this finally gets to a little bit on the big question we get is like, okay, so now what do I do with this? So now I know there's companies out there, they're surging, they're showing intent. How do I do something meaningful with this? Right. And this is where in our system, we came in and we created a list. We went in and we put some quick filters into our system where we said, hey, I only want to care about data in this list, Bombora data, that's, basically a prospect in our, top tiers and intent signals coming in, in the last basically month, right? And for us, that created a nice big list of accounts to go after. So here's companies that are showing up. I mean, there was, hundreds of companies that are showing up on this intent list, right? And I can now pull this list and now I can activate it. What do I want to do with this? Well, I'll send this over to our marketing organization and they will, put this up into our performance marketing programs, which will get ads out there and some pay-per-click ads going out there, maybe get this up to LinkedIn to do some, advertising. When we start to see accounts that are surging with scores, this would say, to our point earlier, showing actual engagement with our brand and intent, this and, is an ideal prospect for us. This may be somebody that we would actually kind of move down funnel and actually have sales do some outreach on. Right. And that kind of takes it from intent data all the way into your system to how do you measure if it's working and what's going on, and then how do you operationalize it, throughout CaliberMind. Misha, any thoughts on this? I know we've just been implementing and releasing this here in the last few weeks.
I think it's a few interesting things. One, it speaks to the volume comment we made earlier. Some events might be more pertinent to outcomes, and so it's important to if we just say, oh, ROI analysis is a keyword, it's always going to show up, and we might choose to de-weigh it, and that's why applying a scoring like model to intent, I think is very interesting. And the other thing I really liked is this intersection of the activation piece. So the intersection of first party and intent, and we can identify. So your list could potentially be cut down by another dimension, which would be, well, let's look at a secondary model that would be first party model, and then are there organizations that are showing activity there? Maybe that one goes to sales, right? Maybe that one actually gets excluded from the marketing one. I think the level of sophistication, it's just on the cusp. I think there's so many ways that this can really be used.
Yeah, I think it's important to be able to run different views, different models on this that show different aspects of how this is interacting with your brand. Like in this model we're showing here, it's just the intent side. So these are the intent. But we have other models that we run that shows just the engagement side. Here's where they're engaging with your brand. And you may want to have a model that kind of brings those two together. Say, I want the ones that are showing intent, but only a certain level of engagement. They haven't gone this far down the funnel. And then being able to turn that into a segment or a list that you can then send out to an activation platform of some sort.
Yeah, when I joined, I was at Adroll running their marketing operations team prior to joining CaliberMind. And I thought I knew everything about MarTech, but then I realized ad tech is a whole other beast. So there's all this matching that has to occur to actually activate this data. And so I think it was really interesting that you showed, all right, well, first of all, I want to score the fit of each account. So just because someone's surging doesn't mean that we want to sell to them.
Mhm.
Right? You know, we're a premium offering on the market. If there's a mom and pop shop surging on attribution, we're probably not going to pick up the phone and call them. So then it's the whole audience matching, CRM onboarding, which domains are actually matching to which accounts by fit, by firmographics, technographics. There's a lot that has to go on to make that work. And I think we've taken a lot of the guesswork out of that in this model. So very cool to see.
It's great. Okay, well, I think we're right about time. So Misha, Nic, thank you so much for joining us today. That about wraps it for Funnel Lab Fridays. And hope everyone has a fantastic weekend.
My pleasure. Take care. Great weekend.
Thank you.